Now, we all know, Bob, that as a business, when the fight is big enough, you've worked with Don King, you've worked with De La Hoya, even Al Heyman. How do you make this happen?
Al Heyman, he refuses to allow any of his fighters to get beat by a top-ranked fighter. And if Terrence fights Errol Spence, there's one winner, and that's Terrence Crawford. That's Terrence Crawford. That's Terrence Crawford. That's Terrence Crawford fights Errol Spence. There's one winner, and that's Terrence Crawford. And Al Heyman refuses to allow it.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, well, I'm sure that most of you have heard already about the PBC potentially disavowing the WBO as an organization, not recognizing them nor any of their champions throughout various weight classes. And to that talk, to those rumors, WBO President Paco Vera had this to say. He says, if this is truly their position, PBC's statements regarding the WBO confirm what the press and boxing fans already suspected. It is a misguided attempt to avoid the possible unification bout between WBO welterweight champion Terrence Crawford and Errol Spence Jr. Now let me preface everything I'm about to say with this. None of these sanctioning bodies, none of these alphabet organizations, none of them are perfect. All of them have got their flaws. And we're not disavowing that they have flaws. We're not disavowing things that have arched people's eyebrows in the past. We're not here trying to rewrite history just because Paco Vera said something that we all happen to be saying ourselves. So this doesn't change the pause. You understand?
But we're not trying to.
But just in regards to what Paco is alleging, his stance, his take on what's going on, yes, I very much agree. Just in regards to what's going on here today, conversations, rumors, reports that the PBC means to disavow the WBO as an organization. They will not recognize them. And what could be motivating that move? What's behind it? I agree with Paco Vera that if we're seeing this now, it's because the PBC is using this as an excuse to not stage a unification fight between Terrence Crawford, the WBO champion, the WBO, who all of a sudden they don't want to recognize, and their guy, Errol Spence, the IBF champion, that at a time when the fans are making it crystal clear what fight they want to see at 147, at a time where there is a fan demand for a particular fight, the PBC is using this move as an explanation, as an excuse to not stage the fight. And what this denotes is the politics of boxing, rather another arm of it, and how those politics at times stifle situations, stifle fights that the fans really want to see but sometimes don't happen. That's really what this is. It's entirely possible that Errol Spence and Terrence Crawford never fight. Yeah, you have to entertain that possibility because it's entirely possible. The PBC is more than happy to let this fight go cold and let the gravy train pass by. Also, they can circumvent working with other outfits. Bottom line. That's a reality that some people may have to accept, that those two guys might not fight. It could happen that way. And, don't expect Al Heyman to find the balls, to find the cojones, to stand in front of a camera and explain his position. Don't expect him to do that. That guy's a recluse. I mean, if I didn't know better, I'd say that the guy was hiding to exonerate himself of culpability. This guy don't explain his position on nothing, okay?
He just hides.
This guy is no ambassador for the sport of boxing. Think about it. How could he be an ambassador for the sport of boxing when he's constantly hiding? Bob Arum, how old is this guy, right? This guy's senior citizen, but he's at every fight, at the forefront of the sport, representing himself, representing his brand and his fighters, his entire stable. And this guy, he's old guy, he's been around the block, he's got nothing to prove. He's been here through several eras of the sport of boxing, involved in some of the biggest situations the sport has ever seen, and yet this guy still finds the time to be at the forefront of the sport, to represent it, to be an ambassador for it, conduct the interviews, answer the questions, explain his positions on various subjects that sometimes don't even involve his fighters. Bob Arum, who's 60-something, I don't know how old the guy is, but he's an old guy. And he still has the time, the energy, and more importantly, he has the desire to express these views because he's very much a part of the sport of boxing. He represents it, at least a part of it. Whereas you look at Al Heyman, you got a major move like this that could be going on. An organization not recognizing a sanctioning body anymore, and the PBC has yet to offer up an actual explanation as to why that move is happening. What's happening? You're leaving it to the imagination of not only your fans, but your critics. And your critics interpret this move as a means for you to make excuses not to stage certain fights, and you're letting them. You're letting them, because that's how bad you want to cut yourself off from the rest of the boxing world. You know, I had a passing thought the other day on Ring IQ Facebook that I expressed in a live interview that, while this may make a lot of people angry, that when, we might not get to see Terrence Crawford fight any of the guys the PBC's got, that there's a lot of people that are angry about that, and they superimpose it to other weight classes where the WBO has champions and realize that, fights between those champions and any PBC fighter, those aren't very likely to happen either. I mean, if a mega fight like Crawford versus Spence is now being put on the back burner so the PBC doesn't have to work with Top Rank, and they're no longer recognizing the WBO. If a mega fight like that ends up on the back burner, it's a safe bet that smaller fights that would require the same things, but that smaller fights, they're not going to happen either. So the idea of an undisputed champion happening in various weight classes, so long as it involves a PBC fighter, it's not likely to happen. I thought about these things because there's a lot of people that are angry right now. But I also thought to myself, if there's a silver lining here, if there is a silver lining, if something good is to come of this beyond the Crawford versus Spence fight and beyond what fights are not made available here today,
Pay attention.
if there is a silver lining, it's that is one less belt the PBC can hold hostage. Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's one less belt you have to worry about the PBC getting their hands on. The less belts they get their hands on, the better it is for boxing. Because if they get their hands on a belt, they're gonna hold it hostage. The way Gervonta Davis has got the WBA title held hostage at 130. Need I remind you that this guy's not facing the best and brightest guys at his weight class, and he has no intention to, in spite of the sound bites. Nobody's holding their breath to see Gervonta Davis fight a Miguel Burchelt, a Jamel Herring, or a Tevin Farmer. There's been plenty of time and opportunity to make those kinds of fights, but they haven't happened yet, and I don't think they're about to. So he very much has the WBA title held hostage, and he's using it for little more as a trinket to exhibit in his showcase fights. That's what he's using it for. Well, if the PBC no longer plans to recognize the WBO, that's one less title you can hold hostage. And that, my friends, is the silver lining. In all honesty, I wouldn't mind if they disavowed every single title in the sport of boxing, in the sport of pugilism. You look at the PBC's practices, and they very much seem determined to cut themselves off from the rest of the world of boxing. They're only concerned about
In-house fights.
what's good for the PBC and what they can make within the PBC. So in that way, they're isolating themselves from everyone else. And I thought to myself, so why don't they just take it a step further and not recognize the IBF and the WBA and the WBC? Why don't they just do it across the board so that we never have to worry about one of their guys holding belts hostage? Oh, I know that it sounds a little crazy, a little spacey, a little bit out there. But need I remind you that it's the PBC's own policy to isolate themselves from everyone else. That's what they're trying to do. That's what they've been trying to do. They are cutting themselves off from every other outfit in town, and now they're going as far as cutting themselves off from one of the sanctioning bodies that ranks fighters, that crowns champions. They're doing that too. So that they're already geared towards going in that direction. I'm just suggesting that they take it a step further and disavow all the other sanctioning bodies that are out there. Why not? If they did that, we'd never have to worry about them stifling a fight. We'd never have to worry about them, preventing a unification match or a division plateauing as a result of their business practices. We'd never have to worry about that in the sport of boxing. The PBC seems determined to operate as if they are their own fighting federation within the sport. And that's what causes the problems. That, you really can't do that, because even if you are a different outfit than Top Rank or Matchroom, all these different fighters in the greater scheme of things are ranked amongst and against each other. Top Rank's guys and Matchroom's guys and Golden Boy's guys and Main Event's guys, all these different outfits in the sport of boxing, they're all ranked amongst and against each other. So they're often a part of the same conversations, whereas the PBC doesn't want it to be that way. The PBC wants to be separate from all of that. So what I'm proposing is that they take it a step further and become their own fighting federation. Come up with your own PBC princess belt. Leave the historical belts like the WBA, the WBC, the IBF, all those kinds of belts, the Ring Magazine belts, all that shit. Just leave that behind, because you don't want to find yourself in a situation with any of these other outfits anyway, right? So why stick around? Why fight for these titles? So long as you're fighting for these titles, well, that's going to be an issue. I saw one guy equating the PBC's business practices as tantamount to what Dana White is doing with the UFC in terms of mixed martial arts. He hypothesized basically that that's what they're trying to do, and what's wrong with Al Heyman trying to build a monopoly. And that correlation that he's making between the UFC and the PBC is tenuous at best, because Dana White is not monopolizing all of mixed martial arts. You understand? He has his brand, his fighting federation, but his fighting federation is one of many in regards to the sport of mixed martial arts. You got Bellator, One Championship, Risen, K1. There's lots of different federations that are out there, and Dana White is not monopolizing all of them. He just has his own. The biggest difference in that conversation between mixed martial arts and boxing is all those different fighting federations that are out there and the fighters that they ranked, they're not ranked amongst and against each other. Bellator's guys, they're not a part of the same rank standings as UFC's guys, and UFC's guys and gals, they're not a part of the same rank standings as Risen's guys or K1's guys. Those are all different fighting federations, whereas in the case of the PBC, their fighters actually are ranked amongst and against the fighters of other outfits, and they don't seem to want to work with those other outfits, and now they don't want to recognize certain organizations either. So what I'm suggesting is, okay, these guys want to isolate themselves from everybody. Why not just leave the sport altogether? Become your own fighting federation instead of holding up fights that people really want to see. You can be your own little fighting federation with your PBC belt, the PBC princess belt. You can do that. Have your guys and your gals, if you get some female fighters, you have them fight for, the trinkets that are exclusive to your brand, because that seems to be what the PBC wants to do. I'm just saying, grab the bull by the horns, take it a step further, so we don't got to be bothered with you. And you won't have to be bothered with us or anyone else, any of these other outfits and their stable of fighters that are out there. Because so long as PBC's stable of guys are holding on to the same belts that other fighters that are with other outfits, so long as they're holding on to those belts that those other fighters are campaigning for that may or may not be PBC fighters, this is going to be a problem. PBC obviously doesn't want to work with all these other motherfuckers, right? They don't want to have to do that. Okay, then stop holding on to belts that other motherfuckers might want. If the PBC wants to isolate themselves from the rest of the world of boxing, why not just leave it all together? Problem solved. You can have, your own PBC titles. Because UFC, if you're going to make that comparison between what Dana White is doing with the UFC and what it appears that Al Heyman is trying to do with the PBC, okay, well, those UFC guys, they're not holding on to a belt that a Bellator fighter, for example, is campaigning for. If a guy's in Bellator, he's in Bellator, and they've got their Bellator title or whatever. And in UFC, they've got their UFC title. You understand? So if the PBC is going to take a step in that direction, okay, come up with your own little PBC belt, and you have your guys and gals or whatever you got going on, you have them fight for that belt. You can have your PBC ranked standings that are only comprised and consisting of your stable of guys. You can have your own PBC pound for pound list that exists separately from the rest of the world of boxing, because boxing is viewed as one sport. Even though there are many different promotional outfits out there that have many different content deals with different broadcasters aired on different platforms and channels, in spite of how fragmented boxing can be at times, it is still viewed as one sport. And that's why PBC's guys are ranked right there alongside Top Rank's guys or Matchroom's guys or Main Event's guys in some instances, or Epic or Rock Nation or Queensberry or there's no shortage of promotional outfits in the sport of boxing, but the fighters that those promotional outfits promote, those fighters, they are ranked all alongside each other. Well, PBC don't want it to be that way. Okay, there's your solution. Get the fuck out of the sport. Won't be a problem no more. You can have your own PBC fantasy island all to yourselves. Now, Terrence Crawford, the WBO welterweight champion, his take on it is, there is no street. There is no line. The best are supposed to fight the best. He said there's no such thing, and he cited this past weekend's fight between, Maurice Hooker, who was the WBO champion. Maurice Hooker, who is co-promoted by both Rock Nation and Matchroom, fights on DAZN, and Jose Ramirez, who is promoted by Top Rank and fights on ESPN. He used that fight as an example that there really are no streets. There are no political boundary lines. And you know what? Maybe to those two guys and to those two outfits there aren't boundary lines to them, but to the PBC, those boundary lines, they very much exist. Oh, if you ask a real boxing fan, they'll tell you, yeah, Crawford is right. The best is supposed to fight the best. That's what's good for the sport. The best versus the best. But when it comes to the PBC, that's not the case. They're not looking to match the best against the best. They're looking for the best of the PBC versus the best of the PBC. A world within itself. That's how they view it. The PBC may not even consider themselves a part of the world of boxing. That's what creates the problems. That while other outfits and other fighters out there, they view themselves as part of a bigger spectrum, a bigger scope, where the best is supposed to fight the best, the PBC don't look at it that way. They look at it as our best versus our best. And whatever somebody else is going on, wish you the best, but that's really on you. That's your problem. And I reiterate that what creates these conflicts, what sparks these conversations, is that the PBC stable of guys is still being ranked amongst and against the fighters of other outfits they don't want to work with. So it's going to be a problem so long as these guys are vying for the same world titles. That if a guy has an aspiration to unify all the belts within his weight class, well, if he's got to deal with a PBC guy, there's going to be a problem. And for the fans out there who want the absolution that an undisputed champion brings to a weight class, to his legacy, and to the sport, to those fans who aspire to see more unified champions in all these different divisions in the sport of boxing, so long as there's a PBC guy holding a belt there's going to be a problem. So, I'm just proposing that while many people out there might view the sport of boxing as one sport consisting of many different layers, many different arms, that yes, it is fragmented at times, but it is still viewed as one sport. If the PBC don't want to work within those parameters, if they don't want to have to deal with all these other guys that are out there, why not stop half-stepping and just take it a step further? Disavow all these different sanctioning bodies and get the fuck out of here!